When you think about what we talk about as great innovation and how businesses have made enormous progress, the schooling system we have in place today is basically Henry Ford's 1908 assembly line. We are now 100 years into a rationale which says we have a lot of these children to take care of. We have to process them through the system. We have to give them to the job market. That's an assembly line mentality. And that's what Henry Ford did best. In 1908, when the first car rolled off his line, think about what that car was exactly. It was a metal chassis, 4 wheels, an internal combustion engine, a driving wheel. It took 4 people inside, and it did 18 miles an hour. 100 years later, with $26.5 billion invested only in pure R&D, nothing to do with making the car look better or small changes. 100 years later, the car is a metal chassis with 4 wheels, an internal combustion engine, a clutch system, a driving wheel. It takes 4 or 5 people, and the average speed in London last year was 17.5 miles per hour. This is the net result of 100 years of innovation. It's a scary thought. When you look at it and you say, you look at GM or you look at Ford today, and you say, should I learn how to run a company based on General Motors today, on Ford? Because they're the ones who set up the hierarchy and the rationale that everyone uses still in businesses that are older, let's say. Are we not doing exactly the same thing with schools? Are we not making the GM of schools an American system, a British system, which made lots of sense in other centuries? Makes no sense anymore, but we are emulating this, we are copying this. If you take the auto industry and you see how the emulation works and realize that it happens in schools as well. If you were within a distance of, let's say, 50 meters, you were to line up all of the mid-sized cars produced by any company in the world, Daihatsu and Honda and GM and Renault, whatever you want, and they're all blue and they're all mid-sized, there is no way you can tell me which car is which from which manufacturer. So basically, people are emulating each other. The people in that business understand carburetors. That's why electric cars don't go anywhere, because they could have been done a long time ago. These people understand. They go to trade fairs together. They go to conferences together. They steal executives from each other. And in the end, their cars look exactly alike. And this is what's happening in education as well. You take a developing country that says, now wait a second, how do I get to where I need to be in a PISA standard or any other rationale that says this is quality education? First, I need to copy what they did in Britain or USA. If people had done this with computers, we would now be, instead of putting in WiMAX in the interior of Africa or Brazil, we would say, no, first you have to learn COBOL, which is what we need, and Fortran 4, which is what we needed to learn there. Now you have to have mini computers. And then you have to have rooms full of computers, and then finally I will give you the little notebook. And why are we doing this in schooling? Why are we saying first, to get better, we need to understand what PISA says of us, tells us how much math we have to learn, and tells us why we have to learn the periodic table and how. But nobody's asking, why the hell are we asking people to learn the periodic table still? There is no one here, I think, who can give me 3 elements of the periodic table in sequence. 3. When you go through this process and you say, what's happened to schools? When you ask these why questions in a row, we say things like, why do we have vacations in school the way we have them, with 2-3 months in the middle there? And people say, oh, well, because it's very hot, which isn't the reason, or we need to give the teachers vacations, or the kids need some time to relax. Anyone who has kids knows that after a week of vacation, you have to do something with them urgently. You have to send them to a camp. You have to do something with them. You can't leave them there. What is the reason? If you go back to it and find out, what is the reason for those vacations? The reason is the following, that 150 years ago, all schools were basically agrarian, and the children were needed at home for the harvest. And today they are harvesting crack in New York City, probably. What are we doing with a vacation system that is based on the fact that they came home to help with the harvest? That's there, and there's nothing to question, and that's just the way it is. Now, we go through doing this in other relationships, and you think of something. If you say, look, you were to put someone to sleep cryogenically 100 years ago in 1908, and they were to wake up in a place where they're playing games, they would recognize nothing. In a modern hospital, they would recognize nothing. In all kinds of situations. In a school, they'd probably feel at home. What has happened that makes this sector really one of the most archaic sectors in society? It's a combination, of course, of the fact that parents are very conservative, the fact that parents really throw their kids into the school and say, please tell me as little as possible. The schools say, please come to the gate, but never come in. And then you say, we'll take care of this. In what way? In a very conservative way. And necessarily looking to the past. You can't possibly design something that's disruptive and from the front by making marginal change. And what we're trying to do is make marginal change. And throwing computers into the schools the way they are today is much like taking a place that has an enormous traffic jam and say, we need motors that are 3 times as powerful. It's not going anywhere. And this is what Barbara's saying. It's not going anywhere because it is what people knew at the time is called GIGO, which is garbage in, garbage out. That's how computers were. If you throw in, again, calculus and trigonometry and so forth, what you're going to get out of that is nothing that you want to see. When we look at what could be missing in terms of information or in terms of capacity, I think, for example, of the Russian chess player Kasparov. Kasparov is a guy who's been playing against the Deep Blue and been playing against machines for 20-odd years. Anybody who plays chess knows that basically for you to go 2-3 moves ahead is a tremendous mental power, and he can do 6 moves ahead. He's been playing with machines that first did 1,000 moves, then 400,000 moves, at one point 1 million moves per minute, and had all of the grandmaster strategies and games in its memory. So my question was not, did the machine win in the end? It said, how can any human being play a machine that does 1 million calculations of chess per second? There's only one answer to that. There's only one thing that Kasparov has which the machine does not. It's intuition. And where in our school system do we have place for intuition for the students? And so as this process goes on and you think about it, you say, what, as a process of schooling, what are these children really retaining? Many people will argue that, let's say in an English school, if you're teaching people to read Milton and Chaucer, what you're doing is not really teaching them that in particular or an exercise in calculus. What you're teaching them is to learn how to learn. Well, we have twins that are 4 months old. We have some small kids. Anyone who has kids know that kids come to us with factory-built ability to learn. Because when you take a kid and you say, think any of us, learning a second language is a very difficult thing. What about learning to talk at all? That's got to be more difficult. How do we help? We say mommy, say mommy, say mommy, and the child says fish, right? And that's what we teach them. We teach them to talk? Absolutely nothing. We do absolutely nothing to teach them to talk. Do we teach them to walk? Think about what we do when we want them to walk. We sit here and we say, come. Is this how we walk? Because this is what we teach them. This is how they walk. We don't go next to them and show one step. We just say this. So the heck they're learning from us. They come with a factory-built capacity of learning to learn. Shakespeare and Chaucer are not going to do that for them. When you look at this whole rationale, we came to a point where we said, let's put some people together. We put in 22 people together. We called in people from outside Brazil. We called in Howard Gardner at the Harvard School of Education. We said, what if we were to design a school system from scratch, completely zero base, and we forget everything we know? What would this school look like? And so we embarked on a long process of trying to find out what it was. And the first conclusion we came to is that the role of the teacher is obsolete. When you think about how any of you learned, and the University of Chicago says that the kids, based on the American curriculum of 1,500 pages of curriculum, that the kids, by the time they leave school, that they retain 6.3% of what they were taught. This is the average, the American average. So You're in a business where you're 93.7% failure. This is what you do. You